This is the Juno 106 polyphonic synthesizer from Roland Corporation, released in 1984. It is one of the defining instruments of music from the 1980s, and it was crucial for the development of dance music in the 90s and techno into the 2000s. It's still a highly sought after keyboard. I myself spent more hours than I could count happily playing this thing until the sun came up, but I haven't had my hands on one in about 30 years. So when I saw that Roland released a software version from their cloud, I had to get a hold of it. So this is a video where I'm going to kind of compare the original hardware version of the Juno 106 to my experience with the software version after playing with it for about a month and a half now. I'll go over my hardware setup. It's pretty basic stuff. I'm using a cheap old Casio keyboard as a controller, but I'm getting Juno 106 sounds. Check it out, a lot of fun. This is a relatively inexpensive Casio keyboard that I picked up somewhere around the mid-90s, I think, for probably about $300. It is technically a programmable digital synthesizer, but it's pretty clunky to use for that purpose, and I would say that it's little more than a glorified electric piano with kind of a cheesy rhythm section. It's nothing that I would use for performance or recording, but it's MIDI capable, so it makes an excellent controller for any other virtual instrument that I want to hook up on my computer. Now that is accomplished by an external sound card here that I've got called the PreSonus Audio Box USB 96. That cost about $100 at Best Buy, I think. I'm sure I could have found it cheaper, but I was kind of in a hurry. This thing requires a pretty steady current, I found, so running it off my laptop proved problematic. It kept going offline. Eventually, after some trial and error, discovered that power supply was the crucial issue, so I had to pick up one of these, which is a powered USB port from Insignia. It cost about $20, I think. Once I got that hooked up, my dropping off problems stopped with the audio box, and it works perfectly. So that's my MIDI interface, and it's also got a couple of XLR inputs and TRS inputs for microphones and professional instruments, guitars, and stuff like that. So a great interface for any digital audio workstation. My digital audio workstation of choice is Reason Studio version 11 from Propellerheads. I've always liked this software. It's been a while since I've used it, so I just got version 11, and I'm getting used to some of the new features. The last version I used was probably version 4 or something like that. But this is excellent software for plugging in virtual instruments. Here I've got the Junos in the rack, and just a simple drum machine that comes with Reason called Redrum. Looks like Red Rum, murder backwards. But this thing can emulate just about any drum machine sounds that you want. So you can just load samples in, and then you can synthesize them like an 808. So it's a good hybrid drum machine. You can program it, or you can trigger it from a keyboard. All right, so I've got a kind of a comparison shot set up here with the old hardware control panel from hardware Juno 106 to compare to the software version from Roland's Cloud. You can see the aesthetic is pretty similar, but there are some significant changes between the two. A few things look a little alien on the new version to me, who's used to the hardware panel, but these are improvements. For example, between the Juno 60 and the Juno 106, they removed the arpeggiator, but for the software version of the 106, it's back. So you've got a built-in arpeggiator, and you've got more options for range when you have to transpose the keyboard, because it's not a full 88 keys. If you want to use more on the low end or on the high end, you use these buttons to select your range. Used to be 3 choices, now you've got 6 that go 2 through 64. They've added a second envelope, and there's a condition knob, which is an interesting feature that allows you to actually make your keyboard sound older. Some people preferred the analog synths when they got a little broke in. They said it had a warmer sound, so you can simulate that with the condition knob. The software version also has an updated patch system. Instead of using the old numeric bank and patch number system that was a 2-digit code, you can now put in the actual name of a patch, and you can store an unlimited number of them. It's a little bit of a tricky system. It's kind of a hybrid between the old Juno convention and modern computers, but you get used to it after you use it a few times. So another new feature is they've added some built-in effects, including reverb and delay that you can sync to the tempo. Now here's something that they didn't change and shouldn't have, because this is one of the Juno 106's most famous features, the chorus. It's got a very unique sound that makes a bigger sound out of the single voice oscillators that you would use in polyphony with the Juno. And this is an authentic, true reproduction of the original hardware chorus. It sounds exactly the same. It's perfect. I love it. I love the sound of it. Now, another great feature of the software version of the Juno is, although the Juno hardware could store all of your patches, when you programmed the synthesizer to the sound you wanted, you could save it. But when you called it back up, these sliders didn't have any motors in them like some modern mixers do. They didn't just snap into position. They would just stay wherever they were, although they would be set to what was stored. So with the software version, the sliders all come to represent exactly what the settings are, so it's a lot easier to see where you're at when you want to go to reprogram some sounds on it. So that's a pretty significant improvement. Also, this is designed to work with Roland's System 8, so it's got this plug out button, and you can send these patches straight to the System 8. It's 100% compatible, so you can program on here and play on the System 8. Now, I'm playing this Juno 106 software with my crappy old Casio keyboard, which works fantastically, but I have found that the Juno plugin uses a tremendous amount of processor power, and my computer's a little underpowered. Now, under options, you can change this setting to optimize for lower CPU usage. Now, I haven't found that it has any significant effect that I can notice on the sound quality. I'm sure it does. So I've got a new dedicated workstation coming, so I'll be able to run this at full power eventually. Oh, one other improvement that they've made, the Juno 106 was limited to 6 voices, so you could only play 6 keys at a time if you had it in polyphonic mode. With the new software version, it allows you to play 8 voices. If you want to keep it honest to the original, you can still limit it to 6 so you don't cheat, but if you want the full 8, you certainly can switch it to that and get an even bigger sound out of the Juno. Another handy feature they've added to the software version of the 106 is top center. They've got an output meter, so you can get an idea of how loud a signal you're sending to the mixer. The project I'm currently working on only requires 3 of the Juno synthesizers, so I've got 3 in my rack in the Reason digital audio workstation. Here's the back view in the rack. You can see I've got it all wired up already to the mixer. You may have noticed in the keyboard layout that the pitch bender from the hardware was not present, but it is here on the rack, and this is something that's programmable, so you can control the pitch, and you can use the mod settings so you can get that kind of whammy bar effect that the Juno was capable of. In deference to the Juno's venerated past, my current project comes from the height of 80s pop music. Now, I should mention that I'm running this DAW on a laptop that is equipped with a pretty underpowered Intel Core i3 processor. That isn't much of a problem because this particular project is only using 3 synthesizers, all Junos, and 1 drum machine, and with a couple of adjustments to the performance of the sound card and the synthesizers, I can get this running pretty smoothly. So I seem to be on a bit of a Madonna kick, but this particular song has a bass line that is just incredible and a unique, very easily identifiable tone that I thought would be really fun to run through the Juno. I should mention that this bass line is devilishly difficult to play. Thankfully, I'm recording with MIDI so I can control the tempo, and that makes things a little simpler. By the way, a little bit off topic, but to get this particular song right, I think besides getting the bass tone right, you've got to get this snare drum to sound right. And to get this really snappy snare drum sound, I added some gated reverb, a little bit of hall reverb to a pretty dry acoustic snare drum, and it gives it that real snappy, punchy sound. As you can see for this tune, I'm getting away with just using 6 stereo channels. On the far left, channel 1 is actually a mix from the drum machine. Pretty much all the drums are just stereo mix, pre-mixed in the machine. So that's just the 2 stereo tracks there. I've got the snare drum out separate because of the effects that I wanted to add to it to give it that punch. Again, that's the gated reverb and a little bit of hall reverb for a little extra resonance. I've got some high-pass filters set up for most of the low-end stuff to keep the mix from being too muddy. Pretty basic stuff, but really simple setup. And I could actually get away with less tracks, but because I'm doing an instrumental version, I don't have the pipes that Madonna does. I added a little extra percussion to this just to kind of change it up and keep it more interesting so it's not so repetitive without any lyrics. So with that, here's what the Juno can do with Madonna's Get Into the Groove. By the way, in case you're wondering how to get those really cool synth sounds out of your Juno, I'm going to show you real quick. So this is a custom patch that I'm calling Groove Bass, but it started out as a factory preset called Synth Bass, and I just modified a couple of the settings. So boost the saw way up, sub oscillator up quite a bit, noise about that level, and then for the envelope, no attack, a little bit of decay, no sustain, a little bit of release. That gives it that real snappy kind of synth sound. That's pretty simple. And here's the patch for the main chords, that kind of brassy sound. I think it sounds kind of like a brass section organ hybrid. I started with the warm pad instead of the brass ensemble because I think I was getting a closer sound to what Madonna was doing with the original recording. So you bring the square tooth wave up, sub oscillator mid, envelope should look like this, kind of wider, no attack, very little release, plenty decay, bit of sustain. Bringing the release down from the pad setting gives it that punchier, shorter ended brass sound. And then the real trick is this big old fat chorus 2 that the Juno is famous for, and then plenty of reverb on that channel. Here's another shot of the settings. You can duplicate that and get the same sound. You can really hear that reverb. So to sum up, I would just say that I am very enthused about the Roland Cloud version of the Juno 106. My only real complaint about it is that Roland's advertising campaign took too long to reach me, and I could have been playing with this thing a long time ago. But now that I've discovered it, I think it's going to give me hundreds of hours of enjoyment, just like the original Juno did. Interestingly, the software version of the Juno is capable of 8-note polyphony, and it was named the 106 for a specific reason. This is the Juno 6. This is Roland's first digitally controlled analog synth with 6 voices. Hence the 6, Juno 6, 6 voices. The 106 and the 60, both 6 voices. That's what the 6 stands for. So this Roland Cloud version with 8 maybe should be called the Juno 108, but I'll settle for the good old 106 moniker.